Okay, so have you ever, has anyone ever come to you about, religious intolerance or being treated unfairly, I guess, because of their religion?
Good morning, I'm Rabbi Matt Eisenberg from Temple Israel Ner Tamid, right on Lander Road in Mayfield Heights. So your question is about religious intolerance. Has anybody ever treated me differently because I'm Jewish? Well, yes. However, being treated differently doesn't necessarily mean it's an intolerant thing that's happened. So your question, the question you're really getting at is
An act of discrimination that you've
being
experienced.
discriminated against
Yeah.
because of Jewish. So we live in a country that is just really a blessed place to live. And I'm 58 years old, and I've usually lived in cities where there were a fair number of Jews. And so in terms of what would be termed, anti-Semitism, I can hardly say I've ever experienced that. I've experienced running into people who I would say are idiots, that don't quite get that there are people from different religious backgrounds and come from different places. But really being, the thing that happened several years ago, I would say about 10 years ago, when I was down at down near Cleveland State, and I came walking out of a place where I was meeting with somebody, and I'm wearing my yarmulke, my kippah. See, it says Cleveland Cavaliers. I'm wearing my yarmulke, my kippah, and somebody, was walking by, just some college goofball, said, "Heil Hitler," but that's I think a college could mean an idiot. It didn't go into anything else. When I was in college, when I went to Miami University, I met people who would come up to me and go like this on my head, looking for horns. That's an old misconception about Jews. In the book of Exodus, when Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, it says that Moses came down and his face was, illuminated. He had rays of light, or it could be translated as horns of light. And when Michelangelo in the Middle Ages did the sculpture of Moses in marble, how do you show rays of light coming from somebody? They're like little horns. And so then people would go, gosh, Moses got horns on his head. Jews must have horns. So I've run into things where people didn't quite understand, but no horns.
Okay, do you feel like, so you work in the greater Cleveland area?
Sure.
Do you feel like...
Grew up in Cleveland Heights.
Do you feel like religious intolerance is a big issue in Cleveland? Do you feel like it's something that happens a lot or not so much?
Let me talk about intolerance for a moment. There are things we should be intolerant of. People use the word intolerance much as when I was in high school, when I was your age, people use the word judgmental. They would always say being judgmental is a bad thing. I tell people in our religious school, and I tell members of the congregation, I want people to be judgmental in the sense of what the word really means. If you look it up in the dictionary, the word judgmental means to make judgments about things. You're juniors. You should not get in the car with someone who is drunk and going to drive. Your parents, and I don't know you very well, but I would really like you to make that judgment. Now, I wouldn't say in the way that you guys would say, like, oh, you're being so judgmental. You want people to make judgments about things, okay? When people make judgments about things, the thing I am most concerned about is not jumping to conclusions about things. So if I see you and I go, oh, blah, 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 I jump to some sort of conclusion, that's not the same as making judgments about things. I think that we need to learn about one another and make judgments about things. And if you make a judgment about something and you say, well, child slavery in sub-Saharan Africa is a bad thing, you're not being like intolerant. I don't think we should be tolerant of slavery or rape or, bank robbing with armed robbery. I don't think we should be tolerant of those kinds of things. But I haven't seen intolerance as a huge issue, at least in my community. I do find that people jump to conclusions a lot. One other thing about jumping to conclusions, or not jumping to conclusions, but one other thing about making judgments about things is I find, good morning. I find that when people make judgments about things, that quite often people, Rabbi Eisenberg, you must be Matthew.
I must be.
It's my first name too. I find that when people make judgments about things, quite often they judge to the good. So when people talk about, well, you disagree with me, you're being intolerant, I usually think to myself, or I'll even say, well, this is why I disagree with you. It's not being intolerant to disagree with you. People usually judge to the good. I meet somebody and I usually give the person the benefit of the doubt. This is God's wind, right? Right here. People usually give the benefit of the doubt. So I find that people that throw intolerance as a big issue around could be a little more tolerant themselves.
No.
Okay.
Yes?
Do you have any? Sorry.
No, I think the stories in the beginning helped a lot.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
How's it look?
It looks great.
Yeah,
I
well,
guess,
yeah, that's what cameramen and women always say. Oh, it looks great.
You
I
look
guess-
great, don't worry.
Thanks, I feel it.
Definitely. One more, one
Nice.
last.
All my time.
One last question, I guess, would be, how do you think people like our age, or just in general around here, could help?
Be more open-minded.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. The first thing that you need for this interview is some really very specific questions to ask people. Like, it's not about being open-minded, but I mean, like, ask a very specific question, like, all right, do you think da-da-da-da-da? Okay, now having said that, to your question about being more open-minded, I find that young people can be plenty open-minded because you want to experience all sorts of different things, and you see all sorts of things and you think, well, he did this or she did that, and there might be a whole lot of different issues, and so I think that young people tend to be pretty open-minded in a lot of ways. The thing that a place like Gilmour should be doing, and I imagine they are doing, is giving you a foundation which will help you make decisions about things. Please don't be so open-minded about things that your mind kind of just falls out. So, as we were just talking before you came, it's just like, do you think people are intolerant about certain things? And I said that there are things that I think you should be tolerant of. I'm tolerant of people's foibles, the honest mistakes people make, but I'm intolerant of evil. All right? As I said, child slavery, rapes, crime. I'm intolerant of that stuff. I don't think that that's good. And it's also not just, I don't think it's good, it's not good. The things that, I want to go into this just for a second, because you asked before about religions and intolerance. What Judaism teaches is that we're all created from the same God, this is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. God creates man, and then God creates man and woman. So we're all from the same God, meaning that we're all from the same parent, which means that we all have within us a spark of divinity, and so we should give other people respect, and people have an innate dignity just because they're created, just because they are human beings. We would do a whole lot better, the world would be a whole lot better place if we would just treat each other that way. Now, not everybody does, quite obviously. Okay, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't teach that we should treat each other respectfully and with dignity. You can disagree, but you can disagree. You can be civil in your disagreement. You don't have to be uncivil about your disagreement. One other thing. Judaism teaches that we all then not only come from the first person, but Adam and Eve are parents of all of us. So this also means that every people, no matter where you live, tall, short, thin, fat, white, black, wherever you come from, we all descend from those same two parents. So we're all part of the human race together. So we should take care of one another. I don't know about your family, but in Yiddish there's a word called meshugana. Meshugana means crazy. All right, every family's got its mishigas. Every family has its craziness. But when push comes to shove, your family usually can pull it together and say, okay, let's try to figure this out without killing each other. And that's what I hope and pray we'll do. But it's okay to be intolerant of true evil. Anything else?
No?
Any questions?
No
More?
questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, who's